This podcast is brought to you by Mapper Forward's new Patreon community, the Global Coffee Think Tank. Check the show notes or head to patreon.com/mapperforward to find out how you can become a member today. Welcome back to another episode of our series with Medina Ilyas on the Daily Coffee Pro. Welcome back again, Medina.
Thank you.
We have been talking about your book, The Art of Arabic Coffee, which is a very different way of brewing coffee. A lot of people who listen to this podcast will never have tasted it before. In the West, we have our own kind of rituals for the way that we experience coffee. We usually either make it at home, it's ready when we make up, or either through an automated machine, or we have drip percolator coffee, or we go to our cafe, or we have instant coffee. There are a whole variety of different rituals. Arabic coffee is very different though. And in this episode, we're going to talk about the rituals that you explain in your book around the way that Arabic coffee is experienced. So talk to us about the different stages of the rituals that are involved in Arabic coffee.
Okay, so I will separate them into few parts. The rituals of the preparation coffee on its own, yes, said so that there is so much. For me, it's a mindfulness process. So if you start from scratch, from the roasting the coffee till the time you serve, it will take you at least 1 hour, 1.5 hours.
Yeah, wow.
So it's a really and if you miss any of the parts, and if you're not present there, so if you're not in meditative state, and when the coffee will taste terrible, believe me.
Wow.
So you cannot just like press on the button and the coffee will taste like being nice. And also there is a cultural and religious rituals, which not really religious, but more like a rituals which is going with the coffee, which is done, and we can talk about it. That
more ceremonial, right?
Yeah, more ceremonial, exactly. So from the time I had a chance to witness a real process with the Bedouins. I was once invited in the morning.
Wow.
To sit with the family, and the host, he was like, I think approximately 60-year-old, over 60. So he was the head of the house, invited me in the morning after Fajr, after morning praying. And he said, come and sit and be quiet. So turned out in his family, but it was
simple instructions, right?
Yes.
Just come and be quiet.
Yes, it was like beyond imagination. So it's important to mention that in Arabic culture, actually, coffee is a man's job, and they do it with pride. Now, in today's world, of course, younger generation forget about it. They go to Starbucks, or women are doing it because men are always working. But if you go to traditional families, really, and it's all over, believe me, it's not only like in Saudi or in Yemen or in Oman. To whoever I talked to, historically it was a man's job. So that's wonderful person.
In our family, it's made by the men as well.
So yeah, you can see it. Yes, it's a part of the man's job, and many families till now preserved it. Anyway, So that time the gentleman who invited me, he started roasting the coffee beans on an open fire, and he was fully present. So for 30 minutes approximately, he was constantly looking and taking care that each bean is perfectly roasted the way he wanted. Then it was a manual grinding, then it was adding the spices, then the brewing process. So it took more than an hour while his wife was preparing a breakfast. Wow. And then he brought this coffee, and it was a family quality time when everybody have breakfast and enjoy the coffee, have a family conversation. There is so much behind each part of it. So how you roast it, what you put it, when you're putting, so you cannot just put a coffee and press on the button, because if the coffee is not ground properly, then it will spoil the taste. If the spices are put not in the right time, on the right proportion, it will also spoil the taste. So the beauty of the Arabic coffee and the preparation process is that it's a balance. You need to feel each spice separately. I'm not joking. I'm not joking about this.
I believe you.
And you need to feel the coffee. So the coffee cannot be too strong to overtake the spices, and you need to make sure that the time you put the spices, that they don't overtake the coffee. And if you find the balance and how they taste, they just make it taste. It's like the coffee becomes better. So
Wow.
That's why I don't suggest you not to drink it in a cafes. When in the cafes they often say, oh, and then there is in the menu Arabic coffee. It's not Arabic coffee. Go to the families and witness the rituals, find the time to sit with them, or even try to do it yourself. There is like a lot of tutorials and everything how to do it yourself. So the rituals is about, so the coffee is a ritual on its own. So like a Japanese tea ceremony, you're not enjoying only the taste of that, you're enjoying not the taste of the coffee, so you're enjoying the whole process and the way you serve, the way you drink. It's a different story completely. So it's historically like it was always served in the majlis, and majlis is like, and if you translate it in English, is like a guest room. So all the events, whatever was happening there, is like it can be weddings, it can be funerals, it can be actually political discussions, everything. The guests were always welcome to this room, as known as majlis. And the first thing what was served is always coffee. And it was always served from the right to left. And it doesn't matter who was sitting there. Even if a child was sitting first on the right, he would be the first person to be served.
If they're the most important person it starts at the most important person in the room though, right?
Yes, but if, like, for example, if you're going into the room, it should be, but usually if you enter the room and there is a person who's sitting first on the right, it will be a younger person, he will still be served first.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, so it's like and it's constantly like and like you will be getting more and more coffee until you shake a cup. So if you shake a cup this way, it means finjan. Actually, if you say it in Arabic, it means you're done. It's enough. Because usually, if you take a normal cup and we're in a cafe and we shake it like this, it means, okay, please give me more coffee. Right? So here's a completely opposite. And also the coffee is never served more than a half of a cup. So if it's served for more than a half of a cup, it means you're not respecting the guest.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was trying to understand why, and I was really researching it. So it's like, why? What makes it like? Usually, we also got used by in the Western world right now that if you don't put the full cup, you're not respecting the guest. But there is also a theoretical explanation after talking to different people. So the host put too much efforts to prepare this coffee. He put so much efforts to welcome the guests, and he respects them so much that he is ready to walk so many times and to serve the coffee to his guests. And then it means the more he walks, the more the conversation he will have with each guest. So the less he puts in the cup, it means that the more often he will talk to this person, he will have a few words. And if he puts a full cup, it's originally meant that he doesn't want to have a conversation with this person.
He wants them to leave quicker.
Yes, exactly. Historically, okay, now of course it's not practiced, but historically it means finish your coffee and leave the house.
Yeah, folks, for those of you listening as well, to give you a kind of an insight into how this works, usually in Arab households, when there's people are communing together, there'll be a group of people. And then once the room has settled, let's say there's people are going and visiting each other, or there's a meeting to have a meaning for a gathering, whether it's a funeral or an engagement or whatever it is, families coming together. Once the room is settled, somebody will come in with a thermos and a little stack of cups. They're tiny little cups. They're the size typically of an espresso cup. They have no handle, but they sit inside each other, and we call them finjans. And that's just the word for a cup. And the person who's serving the coffee from this thermos will pour about like tops a few mils, like not a lot. If you
It will
can
be
think,
1/3. It will be approximately 1/3 of a cup.
in Syria we have even less. In Syria, if you were to put that much, it would be like a really short ristretto. Just to give someone, if you served someone the amount of an espresso in one of these cups, it would be considered offensive. So it's like the size of a short ristretto, and the host hands you the cup. You take the cup. You don't drink the whole thing at once, which is considered rude if you were to drink the whole thing. You sip it while the host is standing there waiting for you to give it back to them. So you sip it quickly. It's quite hot. You give it back. Now, when you give it back, there's this exchange that happens between you and the host. So if you shake your cup, it means that you're finished. If you don't shake your cup, it means you'd like some more. And it's perfectly acceptable to want another cup at that time. And they'll pour you a cup, and they'll keep pouring until you shake your cup. So there's this exchange that happens between the guest and the host that's really lovely, and it moves with the conversation that's happening in the room. But once the host is finished, and so they'll put the thermos with the pile of cups down, and then in, let's say, half an hour, they might come around again and do the same thing. And conversation is an art form in the Middle East. It's something that happens. There's rules to the way conversations happen. There's a flow to it. There's an order that people speak in. So when people come together, conversations can go for 4 or 5 hours. And I remember being a little girl sitting like in a room full of people having conversations and just thinking, I want to learn how to do this, and this is what I want to do when I grow up. When I grow up and get a job, I want to have conversations with people. And that's what I do now. And I didn't even remember this until I was a couple of years into having a podcast. But the thing is, while that artwork is happening in the conversation, coffee is woven in and out of that whole experience, as the person who pours the coffee reads the conversation and kind of feels the heartbeat of the conversation to see if it's time to give more coffee and to see if people need to be reinvigorated. If the conversation is really moving and rolling, this is not the right time to serve coffee again. And that just goes with the whole flow of the conversation. And it is such a beautiful thing to be a part of when it happens, because there's a kind of symphony that happens between the way that coffee and conversation seem to flow throughout the afternoon or the evening or whenever it's happening. And this is drunk like well into the night. So this idea of filling somebody's cup is a way of saying, we don't want you to stay for the whole conversation. This is a subtle, very passive-aggressive symbol that you should leave.
It's true.
We really don't want you here.
It's true. About the conversation, actually, it's important to mention the historical facts. That there's a very interesting BBC article about the failure of Ottoman Empire, and then they believe that the coffee was the reason for it.
Oh.
They saying because the coffee made people gather and have a conversations they couldn't do before. And they could sit together in the coffee houses, and the coffee houses were built. And that's where all the opposition and all the actually people who didn't agree with the government at that time started meeting.
Wow.
For peaceful reasons. I can send you this article. It's very interesting. The same happened in Saudi Arabia. In Saudi Arabia, it was banned. There was a years where it was banned as officially the reason was like saying that's they almost tried to put the coffee the same qualities as alcohol, so that as if it's it's caustic, stimulate. But in reality, the reason it was because people were gathering together and were discussing political topics.
How
topics which
interesting.
nobody really, yes. So you're saying that people meeting for 1 or 2 endless amounts of hours, enjoying the coffee, enjoying the community. But when that man's a meeting and when that was happening, then they were taking political decisions. So yeah, coffee in the history played a very interesting role.
How
And changing
fascinating.
the history, really, really, especially Arabic coffee is changed because it's not like we sip it in Italy, like, espresso, ristretto, and then we go. Here, it's a conversation, it's a community, it's a rituals. So, and during this, something is happening. It's something interesting is happening. And of course, it's happening till this time. And historically, even that we're talking about the rituals, even engagements and funerals were done with coffee.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, alcohol isn't available. It's not something that's historically drunk in the Middle East. It's still something that's quite taboo unless it's amongst expats or people who are other than the Muslim faith. And so coffee was the beverage that people would come to get. Coffee and tea are the two different beverages that people would come together around.
But for example, symbolical way how people were proposing historically. So that's like, it's not easy. It's not as straightforward, like as in Western culture, you can say yes and no, right? So it's very different. And for example, when a family of a groom was proposing and the father of a bride wouldn't have said easily and straightforward yes or no. It was so symbolical. So the answers would come from the way he was drinking the coffee.
Oh,
So
wow.
if you have rejected the coffee, it means the proposal is completely rejected. No way it will ever go forward. If he would agree after the conditions, the details were discussed and everything, he should have drank 1 cup of coffee, but without pouring the water and drinking water. Because if he takes some water after that, it means he wants to wash away a taste of coffee that he didn't like it. So there is a lot of things, and of course it differs from tribe to tribe, from country to country, but it was much more than just coffee.
We have so many etiquettes that are inbuilt into the culture of the way that we drink coffee, and the way that we drink tea, and the way it's served, and who's allowed to serve it, who's not allowed to serve it. So yeah, it's really fascinating when you start to observe it and become a part of it. It's such a beautiful thing, isn't it?
Incredible. It's really incredible. And I believe that we need to put efforts. And I'm talking not as an Arab. I'm ethnically like not Arab, but I see it here and but my kids have Arab. So I personally see that we need to put our efforts to preserve this heritage. So
which is such a great reason behind why you have written this book. And that's what I was saying in the first episode, is that you're, from our conversations before this podcast, this is a way for you to help the world see the importance of these rituals and to preserve the documentation of these rituals, which is fantastic. Now, in the next episode, we are going to take a look at the health benefits of all these spices and all these things that we add to the process and the ritual of making coffee. Because while sugar is sacrilege to add for coffee professionals to coffee in the West, we're going to talk about some really great things that are added to Arabic coffee to enhance the experience and the flavor. Let's do that. Alrighty. Peace, love, and peanut butter, everybody. Have an amazing rest of your day. Thanks, friends. If you enjoyed this video, here's what you should check out next. Consider supporting Map It Forward on Patreon and be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell before you leave.